I want to thank the organizing committee for inviting me here today. And this has been really a great meeting. Very, very interesting. I've already come back with a lot of ideas, so really well worth it. I don't know if what I'm going to say is really going to, it may stimulate some conversation with respect to what you want to do. We'll see, and it's a little bit disjointed, but I'll give it a go and see how this goes. Some of the key components that certainly you folks are already doing and that we found as well. Key components and some of the things that we learned, I guess, and sort of subconsciously went through really, was early communication about a new pest, finding out about new pests, and we hear about USDA and PPQ and APHIS and many agencies and organizations that have these pest networks that have been working and looking over the horizon at potential invasive pests, and communicating that information is very important. And then also being able to do a relatively quick threat assessment. Is this new insect or disease or insect disease complex going to be a threat, and to what, and how big a threat? And then, of course, getting regulatory assistance as quickly as possible is very important. Of course, obtaining funding for research and the extension programs. Either having partnerships or building partnerships among the industry, the regulatory agencies, the research and educational institutions, and of course the government and legislative representatives. And then also dealing with both the insect disease component of the threat. So just a little bit about the early communication. Trying to get as much communication across institutions, both regulatory and educational and research, at all different levels, locally, state, and federal. And of course, this is difficult when you have these new introductions, and in their native habitat, they're probably not much is known about them, and they're not really an issue. They're not a pest. And then they show up here, and then they are a problem. So it's really hard to know that, and also it's also difficult when there are so many new insect and diseases being introduced into the U.S. I mean, astronomical numbers, and we've talked about that a little bit. And also because a lot of these insects and diseases which aren't problems in their native habitats, there's very little known about them. So in many cases, you're starting basically from zero. And this is just talking about with the avocado in our situation. You know, it was introduced in 2002. It became apparent that it was an insect vector disease, 2000, 2004. In early 2005, early 2006, we took avocado trees up to an infested area, and they were attacked and killed. It became apparent this may be a threat. So assessment, this needs to be done as quickly as possible, and that's what you guys are doing right now. In our case, we had many cooperators with the Florida Department of Agriculture, Consumer Services, Division of Forestry, and the Division of Plant Industry. Of course, the university, and different departments. And so there were some West Indian Donny avocado trees planted in Fort George Island, Florida. And later on it was confirmed they were infested with the beetle and Laurel wilt. And then a large dooryard avocado tree in North Florida was confirmed attacked and killed. And then some very rapid work was done on artificially inoculating trees, and they died. And then finding that the beetle attacked avocado of varying genetic backgrounds. Pretty much you presented it with an avocado tree and it attacked it. And this, again, I touched on building and maintaining partnerships. And so as you have here, we have a close relationship with our formal avocado industry, with the regulatory agencies, with various state and federal and private research institutions, and with legislative representatives, especially at the local and the state level. And we did meet early on with some of our federal representatives to make them aware. although I think we should have been even more proactive with them early on. I think that's something we've definitely learned, that we should have started probably much earlier, meeting with them, informing them more closely, because certainly they can help with the funding situation. Regulatory assistance, that's key, getting that right up front, very beginning, and we did have that with the Department of Ag, the Division of Forestry. They started immediately putting out alerts, and then the Division of Plant Industry, which works with the horticultural industries. Also, pest alerts and websites and outreach. They immediately started trapping, using sentinel trees to try to track where the disease was moving. Also doing sampling and monitoring of sentinel trees. And we already spoke a little about the firewood and unprocessed wood products, and they began the process, of course, it was after the fact, but Florida now does have some regulation on the movement of wood products. And the formation with the Florida Department of Ag, we formed a Laurel Wilt working group, which includes people from the regulatory, research, and extension side. And we meet with them probably 3 to 4 times a year, also on an as-needed basis if we have to. Also, USDA and APHIS, I know, are working on some national regulations concerning the movement and introduction of wood products. And also the development, this was done in conjunction with the University of Florida and Randy Pletz, the recovery plan for Laurel, Wilt of Avocado. And then even locally, there were, of course, local regulations on burning. You just can't go out to the grove and light a match and walk away from that. So getting them into the loop on smoothing. How do you get this permit? How do you get it ahead of time? What can you do? And then also liaison with the Department of Environmental Management, which is like our local EPA, on tree removal and things like that, especially of native trees. So research funding, of course, this is a big thing, is that obtaining the initial research funding can be difficult because you need to demonstrate that need or that threat as quickly as possible and make the case that you're going to need to start to address this with some research. We were lucky enough that the Florida Avocado Administrative Committee and our Office of the Dean for Research were convinced with what I had shown you before, and they immediately started to put some seed money towards the research. Probably, I'd say it was about $150,000. So that's not a whole lot of money, but it's enough to let's start to gear this up. And then later on, USDA APHIS also provided funds to the plant pathology and the entomology group as well. The big key is obtaining sustained funding, and a lot of that is done through competitive grants, whether they're directly from USDA or through your state government in block grants. And also, in some cases, you can find some targeted funding either from state, local, or federal funding. But having sustained funding is really going to be key to keeping the research and the goal towards management being obtained. Of course, extension, really a big involvement with the education outreach and coordination. And we've acted as liaison among the industry, the regulatory, and the research and governmental entities, and bringing these groups together. Also, informational and educational outreach. We advocate for the research funding in any way we can as an educational resource for legislators and other funding agencies. And then, of course, industry outreach, educating them with programs on the pest complex, information, training, as an example, how to take a proper sample. And that sounds, maybe obvious to all of us, but getting people to take proper samples so you can do proper diagnostics can be difficult. And then also helping in translating and adopting the research results into a workable system for the industry. And of course, these are all living documents because as the new research findings go on, things change. The recommendations change, and they can change quite rapidly, actually. And then also working with the governmental and regulatory agencies and actually doing a lot of education, information, and some training and coordination with them as well, because they may not be aware of the situation on the ground in your particular area. And of course, working with the industry. And there's a number of different levels in doing this. Of course, working with the formal organization, the Florida Avocado Administrative Committee, very useful for large formal meetings where updates and workshops are provided and reports. And then they have smaller committees, subcommittees. They have some that are formal subcommittees, which include some board and non-board members, and then more informal subcommittees with experienced producers and field managers, which is invaluable to meet with the people on the ground that are in the groves, working the groves, and talking to them and interacting with them and getting their input as to what's important and what's doable, what's not doable. And then also working with the producing community with collaborative outreach, such as setting research priorities and initiatives, extension planning and recommendations, which people here that are in extension know we do all the time anyway, but really helping in, what are your needs, and going over the recommendations. Sometimes researchers come up with what they think are great ideas and recommendations, and when you meet with the growers, it's like, this $1 million solution is just not really going to work for us. So working through the recommendations to something that will work on both sides, get you what you want to recommend, but also done in a practical way that they can use and will use. And then, of course, we have done this many times over the past 6 years, brainstorming among the research, extension, and the growers, meeting with them and just talking about things and the situation and ideas. And that's really, really important, both from a planning and a research standpoint, but also from a psychological standpoint for the industry as well. So it becomes important. And then also realizing that there is a balance, that these complexes are not all about the insect or the disease. It's about both of them. And that you need substantial funding for both. And that if you have a lopsided effort, you may miss opportunities for progress in understanding, mitigating, and the eventual control of the threat. And just a comment about a moving target. And I'm sure you're going to see many moving targets with this. As an example, and Jason mentioned this the other day, we had the specific diagnostic procedures may differ for detecting the disease depending upon the host. So what worked in our case for Redbay wasn't working in avocado right away. Now it is. Now we have a system. But at the beginning, we didn't. And so that may happen. So you might want to be cognizant of that. And then also trying to figure out some field diagnostics. And we're still doing that. So once you have a positive tree in a grove, or an orchard in this case, do you need to continue to sample every single tree that shows certain symptoms? So we're still working on how we're going to do this and move forward. And then also this Redbay Ambrosia beetle, here we now know that there is a potential for these additional Ambrosia beetles to move the disease. So it sort of like throws another wrench or wrinkle into the whole equation. So what we've learned, the situation is with these are going to be complicated. They need immediate resources to determine the threat, to jumpstart the information gathering with surveys and short-term control, sustained research and extension program funding, and then definite collaboration among all these groups to move this towards some type of management and solution. So I don't know if you have any questions or comments.
Jonathan, do you find growers' apathy or waiting to see it come to their growth before they want to have any action?
Grower apathy. I would say I really haven't run into apathy. I'm always still surprised that there's some growers that aren't aware of it. I got a call while I was here and somebody who noticed the tree declining in their grove, and they persevered enough to make some contact, but I haven't really run into total apathy. Sometimes quite a bit of frustration, but not really apathy. We do have a few, one of the concerns, abandoned groves, neglected groves, poorly managed groves, and we're working with the Division of Plant Industry to gain access to those groves, sample, and then go in and take control action if it's needed. And we're working on that right now. We've gotten to the point where the industry has put up money that if you are a grower that's not managing your grove, and we gain access to it, we sample it, we detect it, we have a crew that will go in and remove that tree. And then later on, we're hoping that they're going to start to use the agricultural tax exemption as a leverage that if you have a grove and it is not being managed or it's abandoned, that you are in danger of losing your agricultural exemption.
Wow,
and so a little bit of leverage here and there. Of course, the state can walk in and do pretty much what they want. So that's sort of but we haven't run into a whole lot of that. I've only run into 2 cases of that so far.
Well, here it seems like the message that the growers are getting, or I think even the researchers, do you find it in a commercial avocado grove? They want it to happen, it seems, almost before they're going to really act. And the lip service is for, well, we're doing something because we're doing research, but really, unless it's really hitting us, we don't really want to deal with it.
I would say what has happened with us is that there really wasn't, people were, the community was actively engaged in working on the threat. But I would say since it has now arrived in some of the avocado groves, we have seen certainly an acceleration. But there wasn't apathy before, but I'd say you definitely got to, and I would just tell you guys, I think you're on the right track. It's better to be proactive.
Just this National Disease Recovery Program, I did the Laurel Wilt one for avocado. There's another one for Laurel Wilt on Redbay. It was maybe premature to consider it for this problem, but be thinking ahead to that. It's a nice way of putting together all the different options and perspectives on managing a problem from the insect, the fungus, pathogen viewpoint. There's a website that's available. They've got one from Huang Bing and a bunch of other ones, and they're usually really good synopses on, what the disease does, what the insect does, and then how to manage it. So just think ahead to when you do have information on the management, putting it together in that kind of package.
So I guess I've got 2 small questions. How common are backyard avocado trees in Florida, and how do you get the message out to the homeowners when you're not dealing with a group that's organized like an avocado growing organization? How are you guys going about dealing with that threat?
Okay, briefly, we know there's over 250,000 dooryard avocado trees in Miami-Dade County alone. That doesn't include the other counties. And our industry is in a confined area, and so we're really not going to be advocating anything for the homeowner. I mean, eventually down the line, there may be some fungicide and insecticide treatments that they could use, but for right now, we know they're probably going to be lost, toasted, yeah.